This is an emergency update. World War III is in full swing in the Middle Eastern theater. I'm going to be parlaying all of the information to you today that I've acquired from my sources. I assure you, most of this you are not going to hear on any mainstream media channel. We also need to talk about a topic that I broached 3 months ago. One that was so sensitive that I was very trepidatious about posting it at all, because it was one of those things that could potentially bring negative recourse for myself and my family. But we have to talk about it today because some new information has come to light. It involves clandestine operations, the world of espionage, and it is going to seek to explain exactly what happened on October 7th, how it relates to Iran, and possibly a much, much bigger picture. Okay, so here we go. What do we got to talk about? First and foremost, U.S. forces, as you probably already know, conducted strikes in Iraq and Syria against Iran's IRGC-backed and affiliated groups. Now, they struck 85 targets. Apparently, this is one of the biggest American airstrikes in a long, long time. 125 precision munitions were utilized, long-range bombers flown all the way from the United States. Perhaps there was some training exercise component to that, preparing for the Russians, but who knows? The targets, and this is very important, were supply sites. Not only that, were logistical supply routes, okay? C2 nodes, intelligence centers, storage and ammunition facilities. But more importantly, these were preparatory strikes. This is just the preliminary phase. Even Lloyd Austin has admitted that this is only the beginning of kicking this hornet's nest, which is going to create an intractable situation that will be beyond our control. The Iraqi government has already condemned the strikes, and numerous groups throughout the region have already pledged to do a counterstrike. Now, interestingly, and wouldn't this just be coincidental, that ISIS is happening to already fill some of the power vacuums within these regions. So some of the places, and this is, I can't say that this is 100% from this source, but we'll just say at this point in time, sources say that ISIS is already moving into these regions that were just bombarded by the United States military. What does that tell you? Now, the whole purpose of this operation, this softening preliminary operation, was to target the supply routes primarily from Syria to Iraq. Also, of course, are going to be impactful if Israel goes to war with Lebanon. So this whole thing, everything here is tied in. This is all related, okay? So there are some completely unsubstantiated reports, and I just want to throw this out there. I probably maybe shouldn't even say it because I don't have evidence of this, but just, do your due diligence and go and fact check this one. I don't think this is the case, but there could be some truth to this. Apparently, there are some reports that Isfahan in Iran was bombed. Now, or there was an explosion there. This is one of the homes of their nuclear facilities. Again, perhaps that's just foreshadowing, okay? We know that the purpose of this operation was to try to stymie the Iranian-backed forces within the region. Now, of course, the Americans telegraphed this for days and days that they were going to do this, and for some people, they took that as evidence to suggest that, well, this is just optics. This is just the Americans trying to appease the war hawks who are saying they want some kind of recourse for the deaths of these 3 soldiers, but they also don't want to start a war with Iran. And you're starting to see already the IAEA and the New York Times say that, well, maybe Iran is actually starting to comply more with their uranium enrichment, almost just like clockwork, okay? But I can tell you right now that that's all just smoke and mirrors. That is all just theatrics. What the United States is doing right now is getting itself into position. This is classic mission creep, okay? You're going to want to make the other side think that you're interested in diplomacy when you're interested in anything but that. Because trust me, after I dropped the bombshell about what happened on October 7th and why it happened and some new information that's come to light, it will all become very clear that the United States has every intention of taking this war to the next level, possibly right to Iran's borders. Okay, this is only the beginning. Now, interestingly, they waited for the weekend to do this, which is quite telling in terms of how this is going to affect the markets or not affect the markets. But I think it's going to backfire because come Monday, that's when the retaliatory strikes are going to start to happen. So the market's going to realize, regardless, that this situation is going to get out of hand. I think some Wall Street, people in the know, some inside traders perhaps, actually believe that these strikes are meant to de-escalate, and which is why we telegraphed it so much before we did it, to give them time to get out, to minimize the casualties, and to hopefully minimize the response. But when you see what's happening with ISIS and that destabilizing factor in the region, you know that they have every intention of creating civil unrest throughout the region that is going to have negative repercussions for American soldiers throughout the region, which means that they're going to be attacked once again. And when they are attacked once again, that's when they're going to come in with, okay, now we got to really do something. But make no mistake, this is just the beginning, the first round of what likely are going to be strikes that are going to happen all weekend long, okay? Jordan is also getting involved in the conflict already. Now, important information. What I talked about 3 months ago when I made that video that I honestly was terrified to make. There's certain places you don't want to go. Even though all of this is open source information, you have to be very careful because this is certainly not open source information that I think they want reaching a broader audience. But it's important for people to understand that things are not what they seem, okay? And we are not untouchable, especially in the realm of human intelligence. So recall that 3 months ago I made a video which basically summarized the information that was leaked by, I think it was an Egyptian ambassador. And basically the theory was that the entirety of the Hamas operation on October 7th was an intelligence gathering operation. Okay, now you have to first ask yourself, why would Hamas, knowing that the Israelis were going to react in such a disproportionate manner, why would they put their entire population at risk just for some optics, just so that they can draw, just so Israel can become the ire of the international community? It was much bigger than that, according to numerous sources on the inside. As I expressed in that video, now new information has come to light today, as Iran has said that they have information on spy rings of the Mossad, the Israeli Mossad, in 28 countries. Okay, this is major. In addition to that, they claim they have intelligence and security data, as well as information about some of Israel's most hidden military facilities, arms factories, and strategic non-military industries. Now, could this be why the Americans are so reticent to go all in on this? Because now the Iranians have this treasure trove of information that they are holding on to. The Israelis and the Americans know that they have it, know that they could potentially utilize it. Now, going back to October 7th, in that video, I talked about how the theory was that, and it's not really a theory, I mean, they did this. The first place that they targeted was a military base that was nearest the Gaza Strip, okay? They took high-ranking Israeli commanders hostage. You don't hear about that anymore, but those guys are still being held hostage, okay? And who knows what sort of information they've been able to acquire just from them. But apparently, when they did this raid, and all of the other stuff, going in and the civilian casualties, all the atrocities were committed, some people are saying that that was just done by these other rogue ragtag groups that kind of came in after this main group, and they were sent in there to create chaos, to act as cover so that this main special force could go in there, acquire this information from part of the information that they acquired was on Unit 8200, which is Israel's elite cybersecurity team. Okay, and this is why I'm saying, guys, like, this is dangerous territory to be treading into, and I'm just giving you a cursory explanation so that you understand that there is a much bigger conflict brewing behind the scenes that I don't even want to know. Because once you try to transcend this level of understanding, that's when you really do put yourself at risk. And you don't want to be playing with that kind of fire unless you're prepared to deal with the heat, okay? So essentially what has happened is they went in, they acquired all this information. Now suddenly today, somebody, basically came out and said this, because this wasn't mainstream knowledge up until this point. But today, okay, Iran came out and admitted that they have all this information. Well, where did they get all this information? Because understand what this means is that Hamas was working for some force or elements who perhaps were disguised as Hamas, we'll say, special operatives, were in this flurry of this attack on October 7th, they are being coordinated and commandeered by forces that are working with the Iranians. Now, this is a massive leak. We're talking about potential nuclear facilities, hidden military facilities, arms factories, and strategic non-military industries. So if they have all this information and identification about Mossad spy rings, recall, right after October 7th, Turkey, they busted dozens of Mossad agents within the country, okay? So this is massive. Now, 28 countries. What are these 28 countries that Iran has dirt on? What is Mossad up to in these other countries? Are they messing with countries like China, Russia, countries which could definitely make this a much broader issue than the Middle East? So this is incredibly concerning information. And the reason why I share this is because people need to understand that this warfare, it's not just kinetic. There's an asymmetrical component to this. There's an intelligence component to this. There's subterfuge. There's misdirection. There's a lot of things happening right now. And oftentimes when they are floating these ideas of diplomacy and peace talks and negotiation and de-escalation, that usually is just cover. Because understand that there's two groups that are governments are trying to fool. On the one hand, they're trying to fool the other side, their adversaries. On the other hand, they're trying to fool us. Because the last thing you want to do if you're about to go to war is create a panic, okay? Because that could disrupt logistics and supply chains, and that could get in the way of the military. You also don't want to trigger any sort of resistance against what you're about to do. So all governments, all parties to any conflict have a vested interest in, right up until the last minute, assuring people that war is not going to ensue. Okay, it's like a Mexican standoff, and this really is a paradox of war in a sense, because on the one hand, the closer you get to war, the more your government is going to deny it. A Mexican standoff like the good, the bad, and the ugly. Right before they're about to draw their weapons, that is peak uncertainty, peak confusion, peak silence, and intensity. And it's like, what would we call it? We've reached a point of saturation confusion, when even the most up-to-date open source intelligence analysts have no idea what's going on. That's when you know the war is probably about to start. Because once you reach that point of information saturation, where it's just confusion, where you don't know if they're being strategically ambiguous, you don't know if they're really, and they're saying one thing, but they're doing another, and they're telegraphing their moves, and are they just telegraphing to misdirect? Once you've reached that point where you have no idea what's about to happen, that's when they're going to strike, okay? Because that's the whole goal of it, to just bamboozle everybody involved, including our own populations. So if you're confused and have been confused in the last week when you're hearing reports that some of these IRGC-backed Hezbollah militias inside Iraq were going to back down and weren't going to stage a response, even if the Americans attacked. All of this stuff is playing an information game. It's playing a big game of disinformation. Some of it is for public consumption, but a lot of it is to just try to confuse the other side about your intentions. So this is why it's so incredibly confusing. But understand that the despondency that I'm seeing in all of our leaders and this dismal, I don't know, dispirited look that they have, whether it's Anthony Blinken or Lloyd Austin, who obviously he's terminally ill, according to some sources, and he doesn't look that healthy. They all just look like this is a foregone conclusion that a massive war is about to happen, but they're all just telling us what we want to hear. But I think what they want to have happen, and it's sad to say, but they want this to crest in the run-up to the election. It's like they're trying to get something done before the election. And the fact that ISIS went in right after, and I'm not going to get into, who created ISIS and all this stuff. I mean, that is a nebulous state of affairs, to say the least. When I think of the Middle East, I just think of the word nebulous. It is just a ball of confusion, okay? Overlapping alliances, tribes, factions, different, even just the various affiliations of countries and the alliances is so incredibly perplexing and confusing, and everybody is trying to maintain power. But understand that we're likely to see some massive civil unrest throughout Iraq and Syria. It is going to carry over into Lebanon. I do believe a lot of this is priming the ground, destroying the supply lines, so that when the war between Israel and Hezbollah begins, they're not going to be able to get resupplied as much. And remember, a lot of this is about not only military supplies, but ensuring, especially if you're a net importing country like Israel and Lebanon are, you have to ensure that your population can eat. You have to ensure that you're going to be able to continue to resupply. Now, apparently what's going on in the Gaza Strip starts to look like one of those riots we seen in 2020 where bricks were left on the street corner, because apparently the Israelis are leaving behind weapons. And northern Gaza is now nearly fully under the control, once again, of Hamas. So how convenient is it that this problem is going to be the gift that keeps on giving from a military-industrial complex point of view, okay? Now, I think that's the gist of what is going on. I talked about how now the New York Times is saying that Iran is slowing uranium enrichment. I don't know if this is misdirection, because just 2 days ago, they were saying something entirely different. So there is a game being played here, okay? And it's both sides telegraphing. The Iranians are basically saying that, hey, we know where all the Mossad agents are. We know where all your facilities are. Don't forget that on October 7th, we collected all of this information, and this is in an attempt to deter U.S. aggression within the region. So they're playing this game of chicken, but it's only a matter of time. This wasn't the draw, okay? This was, this was maybe, how would you map it onto that analogy? Okay, so maybe somebody shot, but let's just say you were going to have several Mexican standoffs, or it was a Mexican standoff with Terminators, okay? This is the first bullet that fired in the shot, and this is going to be something that blows wildly out of control in the coming weeks ahead, okay? Now, I also got another message from somebody who's in the National Guard, and apparently this is how the message goes, and again, take this one with a grain of salt, okay? But this one caught my eye here. Last March, we were brought in and told our mission is now to prepare for World War III. Our unit was told that in October of this year, we will begin SERF orders. I'm not sure what that means. I'm sure somebody will fill me in the comment section. Meaning we are on standby to deploy within 30 days of notice. This is because the Secretary of the Army told the Joint Chiefs of Staff that, Secretary of Defense, I presume, the active military is spread too thin already, so the Guard will be used to fill the needs. Interesting. This month we learned that in February we will be digging and establishing trenches at our own training post here in, I'm not going to say the state because I don't want to out this individual. They will be permanent with concrete footers being poured in the bottom. Not sure if this is the type of info he's looking for, but None of it is classified. Okay, so they think that they're not actually, this is my email, bro. So, you know, I read these emails. I don't have like a secretary or anything. I'm not that special. We have been told to go ahead and start telling our spouses and discuss what this means for our family. So they're doing trench warfare training. Okay, that's big, because wait till I break the news about what NATO has up its sleeve. This is absolutely terrifying. All these countries that claim they are preparing for war, I'm saving that for a separate video, because what's going on the Russian front is a whole other shitstorm unto itself. But basically, he's saying that they need to be ready to deploy at a moment's notice. Now, I don't know the National Guard. I presume perhaps they would assist in some logistical capacity, but maybe there's something else to this with respect to, can the National Guard be deployed overseas? I don't think so, but I don't know anything about this, okay? So I'll leave that to you guys to elucidate in the comment section. What else do we need to talk about? The Houthis. There's some rumors circulating that the Houthis have claimed to sever undersea cables that connect a very large portion of the planet with one another. However, the Houthis didn't say this, but I do believe this is foreshadowing, because in addition to all the ships that pass through here, you can't see it, but you probably won't be able to see this, but in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait right here, this is where all the undersea cables connect the East with Europe, essentially. So you would be severing the connection with those, and it probably would not be hard to do. It would be impossible to fully defend. If they wanted to do that, they most definitely could. Now, I got to leave it there, guys. I got to get going, but stay tuned, because we're going to be talking all about Russia and Ukraine next, and I have no doubt in my mind that this situation in the Middle East is about to flare up in a massive way. The clown world markets, oil was down significantly. I think that was, if that wasn't a buying the dip opportunity, I don't know what was, but this is not financial advice, okay? I do believe that now is the time to prepare. This is it. This is the time that you absolutely need. If there's anything that you've been waiting for, don't wait any longer, because we're but one big black swan away from the entire supply chain shutting down. And while there might be somewhat of a glut in terms of certain commodities that are available right now, that is not going to last, I assure you, because when the shit starts, it ain't going to stop. Check out our new flagship video that we released yesterday. The communist camera crew lost a few hairs, and I think the original communist cameraman is now gray. He's balder than me, and he has more gray hair than I do. So that was, I tell you, that was one hell of a video to make. It was, I would say, in terms of this prepping thing, it was a summary of my life's work. It was a great video to work on, but just from a technical graphics standpoint, it was incredibly challenging. So I hope that we didn't overcook it. I hope that you can share that video. I think it's a very shareable video. It's a very even-keeled. It's apolitical. We're not promoting any extremist ideas. There's no surreptitious desire to politically win your votes or anything. Just go and check it out. It's a philosophy of preparedness, but it's also talking about why we are at a tipping point. Okay, we are reaching the point. We are not reaching the point. This is it. This is the catastrophic nexus. I got to say, we've been seeing temperatures here that are just staggeringly off the charts. There was a place in my province in Saskatchewan, Canada, that was hotter than it was in Florida. Okay, 21 degrees. We've completely shattered heat records here. There's no snow on the ground. It all melted. It feels like spring. Fortunately, I was able to go and do some winter gear review videos this week. We seized upon it while it was here. But I'm telling you, man, we are reaching so many tipping points all at the same time. Just be thankful that you're this early. Thanks for watching, folks. Stay tuned for more. Canadian Prepper out.